through Catherine Austin Fitts with us. She has served as managing director and member of the board of directors of the Wall Street Investment Bank, Dillon Read and Company. She's also served as an assistant secretary of housing and federal housing at HUD in the first Bush administration. Her book is called Dillon Read and the Aristocracy of Stock Profits. Catherine Austin Fitts here on Coast to Coast. Catherine, welcome back.
It's great to be back, George. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
Very good. Very, very good. I just, I'm in Europe now, but I just got back from a wonderful trip through Tennessee and Pennsylvania and also dipped down to South Carolina. So I got to drive all the way across and back. And, the United States is as beautiful as ever.
Lots to talk with you about, but back home here in the United States, Catherine, mortgage rates keep creeping up, and up. They might even hit 8%. What's that going to do to the housing market?
So it's tough on the housing market. What's been amazing is how well the housing market has held in many, many places. Prices obviously way up because what you're doing is you're channeling inflation through the balance sheet. And you've got what happened during the pandemic is you had the Fed injecting huge amounts. It's called the Growing Direct Reset. In fact, this week is the Jackson Hole meeting where they voted on the Growing Direct Reset in 2019 in August, where the G7 central bankers meet under the auspices of the Kansas City Fed in Wyoming anyway. But the Fed injected massive amounts of money, and of course, a lot more money ended up in the hands of insiders as opposed to outsiders. And then when you shut down the outsiders' businesses during the pandemic, then you have huge money in institutional hands to buy up real estate. And that's what we're watching. We're watching a permanent shift out of home ownership in the United States into rental, and it's financed very much by the Fed's injection on the Going Direct Reset. Now, once you do that, of course, you kick off inflation. And, it's very interesting. You and I have been talking for many years about the debt growth model and how we keep printing more paper and printing more paper. And the reality is now that the debt growth model is over, there's a real scramble as to who controls the real assets. The paper game is flowing, and so now everybody wants to know who owns the land, who owns the real estate, and there's a real grab for real estate. And unfortunately, the insiders are replete with cash, and the outsiders have been really hit hard by, the different shenanigans during the pandemics to hurt their business. And so now you see a huge move in to buy the real estate, and it is running up prices because you have a lot of institutional capital going in, or people saying, I want to own real things, so I'm going to buy a second or third property. So especially in the areas of the country where people are moving into. But there's no doubt mortgage rates are going to slow the market. And if you're the central bank, if you're the Federal Reserve, you're going to do everything you can to defend the dollar. And if that means interest rates go higher, they go higher.
And what about the 2008 crash? You don't see a repeat of that, do you?
No, I see something far worse because the response to what's happening globally is a desire to use digital technology and space. Back to your, what all the things you've taught me, George, but to use digital technology and basically space infrastructure to assert complete control of financial transactions. So I sent you one of our latest pieces on financial transaction freedom, and we prepared for some of the legislators in the states that are most concerned about this. And unfortunately, they're shifting to totalitarian control is what they'd like to do. And if they can institute CBDCs or different forms of financial transaction control, they're going to be able to do something that the central bankers have never, ever been able to do, in the history, not to say that they haven't tried before. So it's a critical time for everybody because, it's like a gold rush. Everybody's rushing to grab the real assets, and everybody's rushing to be the guy who controls their country or their industry, in this realignment of the application of digital technology. And AI is a big piece of that. I think you just covered that tonight on the news. So it's a real it's a real consolidation. And, of course, the problem at the very root of what's happening, George, is what we need to do is build wealth, not destroy wealth. And this kind of centralization consolidates wealth, but it doesn't build wealth. Freedom is what builds wealth, and free markets is what builds wealth. And the problem with what's going on is it's hugely destructive of wealth. And if you drive around America, you know, the insiders look great and the outsiders are getting killed.
Catherine Austin Fitts with us. Her book is called Dylan Reed and the Aristocracy of Stock Profits. Her website, Solari.com, SOLARI.com, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Well, sometime on Tuesday or even Wednesday, nations of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which they call the BRICS, are supposed to get together to form their own currency backed by gold or other precious commodities. Is that going to happen?
So I'm a skeptic about any success of the BRICS at putting together a new currency, let alone using it right now. But make no mistake about it, this meeting, George, is remember the line in Star Wars, there's a tremor in the force.
Yeah.
This summit is huge, and the reason it's huge is, let me just step back and explain what the BRICS are. So traditionally, many of the global decisions have made by a group called the G7, which is 7 of the largest, most important economies in the world, including the United States, Japan, Canada, the UK, France, Italy, etc. And what has happened is the G7 created something called the G20 to bring in some of the other nations. But the biggest, the fastest growing in the G20 were identified by a member of the investment community, called them the BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then South Africa came in as the S to make it BRICS. And these are basically 5 of the fastest growing economies in the world. Let me give you a sense of how big they are. The BRICS combined have approximately 40% of the global population, about 30% of the land mass, and almost 30 trillion of sort of global GDP. That's about 25%. And in combination, they have foreign reserves of about $4.5 trillion. So, and they're growing quickly. They're growing faster than the G7, and they're growing faster than some of the other countries in the G20. So in terms of growth, they're basically low per capita companies that are moving up very, very fast and have been moving fast basically since the end of the Soviet era, et cetera, and the sort of effort to bring everybody into the global economy and the markets. Now, what's important is don't just think currency, think channel. Since World War II, and I have a great book which is public called State of Our Currency that describes the whole history and sort of what's going on now in the shift to a multipolar world. But you had, from World War II on, you had the Bretton Woods model, which was a huge trade model. Everybody could participate in the U.S. by controlling the sea lanes and having the world's largest military. Basically acted as the global cop. Everyone went into it, and it created a very broad and liquid adaptation of the dollar and the euro dollar, not just the U.S. dollar, but the euro dollar and the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency. And everybody went through that channel. To do trade, you had to go through that channel. To have big assets, everybody was in the channel. And now what has been happening is the BRIC nations have been creating a new channel. Now, whenever somebody creates a new channel, the Bretton Woods channel, and the U.S. as leader gets sort of ornery about that. And so we saw Gaddafi in Libya try and create a new channel in Africa, and we know what happened there. So France and the United States and the European, basically the NATO countries, went in and now Libya has been destroyed.
Hold on for a second, Catherine. We're at a break, or we'll come back and chat more about this incredible story of this meeting of these nations.